All right. Well, welcome again. I think we have enough people to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining me again for this month's office hours with Billy. Just as a reminder, as we're going through the presentation today, if you have any questions, please go ahead and use the question feature as opposed to the chat. It's a little easier to track and make sure I don't miss any questions. We'll go through and answer any questions at the end of the presentation. And if there's something that might be very specific to your company that we might not want to answer to the whole group, or something that requires a little more follow-up or research to answer, we'll make sure to get support tickets set up for that, and we would follow up with you after the call. Otherwise, I'll answer as many questions as possible at the end of the call. This month's topic is what's new in Cargas Energy, or what have you been missing out on if you're on an older version of Cargas. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Billy Ward. I'm a consultant with Cargas. I've been with Cargas for just about 5.5 years now. So looking forward to walking through some new features in our product. This is a little different than some of the other office hours with Billy presentations that we've done. Typically what we would do is we would take a single topic and do more of a deep dive into that topic, or a review of that specific area of Cargas Energy. We're going to do things a little different this month. This month, what I've done is kind of compiled some of the more prominent new features that have been released over the course of last year and this year. We're going to be covering them as they pertain based on what area of Cargas they affect. If you are on an older version of Cargas, a lot of this should be new to you. A lot of these features should not be in your version of that product. Specifically, if you have a 2019 version or older than that. If you're on a newer release, if you're on a 2020, 2021 release, some of these features may already be available to you. You just need to know where to look for them. So I'd be happy to kind of show where some of these features are. You can see some of the topics we're going to be talking about are new service, routing improvements, our point of sale app, and a few more other features. Now, the list that we'll cover is not going to be a full encompassing list. There are other features that have been released that we're not necessarily going to talk about today, a lot of times because they require a deeper dive than we're able to take, and might be more of an integration type piece, and there might not be much that I could display for them. I do recommend going into our knowledge base in the support site, and you can do a search for release notes. If you want to find out more specific information about which release has any of these features, go ahead and do that. You'll be able to find release notes for any of the topics that we're talking about. So first thing I'm going to do, instead of wasting time on slides, we're just going to go ahead and dive in and talk about the new features that have been released. I think one of the most important things to really know about Cargas Energy is how to figure out what release you're currently on. From the Cargas homepage, if you hover over your login in the top right-hand corner next to the divisional filter, you're able to see what version of Cargas you're currently on. So right now, I will be displaying features that have been included up through the 2021.7 release, which is our most recent release. Just as a follow-up to what I just mentioned about looking for release notes, always keep in mind our Cargas announcements is a great resource to find out when the next version of Cargas is going to be released, as well as what features and bug fixes are going to be included in that most recent update. You can find that either as an independent announcement when that comes out, or sometimes it's included in the weekly newsletter. So just keep your eyes peeled, check out those Cargas announcements as a great resource for finding out when the next release is going to be. So like I said, I've organized today's topics um, more on subject matter than on when it was released. So a lot of these features we'll be talking about are going to be a combination of features that were released in both the 2020 and 2021 releases. One of the first things and one of the bigger items on our list is going to be the newest and latest version of service. So that moved out of what we call our beta branch, which is our testing branch of the software. And it moved out of testing and into our live environment for all our customers as of the 2020 release. So one thing to note, depending on your current operating system, if you are currently using mobile service or have never used mobile service before, some of these features might not be fully activated in your current software. So it kind of depends on the level to which you are using service. Some of you may already have this initiated. Some of you may still be using our older version of service because you have older versions of our tablets. So this is kind of one of the few features that's not necessarily a plug and play or overnight you flip a switch and everything's there. So just want to point that out before we talk about some of the new features within service. So just to give a brief overview of some of the newer features within service, first thing I like to point out is our task templates. So if we go to our service task templates menu, within our task templates, this is how you can build and bill service work. Very similar to what we used to do with service codes. Service codes now get applied to task templates. So you could theoretically have a more narrow list of service codes and a more broad, detailed list of task templates. It's the task templates that get applied to work orders when they're created on pieces of equipment or tanks. If I were to edit into one of these task templates, you can see we have task template name and description. Some cool things that we can do is we can put in the estimated hours to complete. We can put in, like I said, we can tie this to specific service codes. We can also default function codes onto a work order task, as well as default work performed codes. You can also choose, if you're building a large list of task templates, you can also choose certain task templates to be hidden from the CSR from the initial scheduling. And this will help narrow down the list that the CSR is seeing to just ones that they would typically be able to select. A lot of times, a customer is calling and saying is something wrong. They think there's a leak or the furnace isn't working or something like that. They don't necessarily know why. You can have general task templates for a no heat call, and maybe we'd want to consider that a diagnostic task. So we can put that informationally as a diagnostic task and make that visible to the CSR. But then we can have additional task templates to help track the diagnosis separate from what actually is going to be fixed and the work that actually needs to get done. Also, on our task template, we can choose how this is to be scheduled. Is it going to be scheduled by the CSR? Is it required to be scheduled by the CSR? Or can it go to the service dispatch board as unscheduled and a service dispatcher can manage the scheduling from there? You have the option to require one of the other or allow the CSR to make a determination when the initial call comes in from the customer. You can also choose how a task template gets billed, either by a flat rate that's invoiced on one line or by time and materials. You could also set it as an either or situation, so you have the flexibility to bill out to the customer on an individual work order basis, whether it is a flat rate or a time and materials billing. Another feature that comes along with our new service is our item groupings. So I've seen this used in a couple different ways. You can create item groups that are either specific to this task as frequently used items on this task, or sometimes I see these item groups kind of more tied into the different item categories or different item types. For example, all your filters and nozzles, those might be individual respective item groups. When you make an item group, you can give that item group a name and add in your items and put in a default quantity. If I were to edit this real quick, you can also mandate that only one item from this list is selected. I see that more if you're dealing with an item group that is more related to something like a category, like choose one filter from this list. You also have the option to require group acknowledgement, which would tell the service tech while they're out in the field that they are required to either select an item or check a box that says, I did not use any items from this list, to make sure we don't forget to add items to the customer's invoice. As I mentioned before, task templates become the basis of what our work orders are. If we were to go into a customer's account, see from the actions menu, we're able to create a work order by choosing the particular task template. One nice feature, if we were to be setting a leased tank, if we did the tank lease task template, Cargas will recognize that task template and that the tank serial number we add to this particular work order is actually a lease tank, and will actually set up the lease tank info on the tank automatically for you. We do have our view availability screen. It's now our schedule task button. If you're using that currently, that information would carry over and live there. Or I can simply create this, confirm I want it created, and it's moved into our unscheduled work orders. If I open up the new mobile service app, this is what the new mobile service app will look like. So it's a little bit different. Got a great redesign. We have task templates that are added in here. If I open this up, there's a lot of information in here, and we're going to go over this in the most brief fashion. However, working through a task template, the service tech has the option to create new work orders. They can also add additional tasks to this work order. One of the big features a lot of customers have asked for in the past is the view equipment images. If I were to view equipment images on a tablet, I could open up a camera and I could take a picture and attach it directly to this piece of equipment or any tank or equipment that lives at the customer's location. So service techs will be able to use their tablets to take a picture and attach that to the actual piece of equipment. This can also be done in the back office. If you have images that are saved in the back office, you can attach them as well. This is typically where the service tech would go through and mark themselves as in transit, arrived. They would be able to add items and work through this particular work order, eventually marking it as a complete task so it comes back for billing. There's a lot more details behind that, but just to give you a general idea of what the new service app looks like. If we go back here, you can see there's an agenda for a day. And from our menu, the service tech will have an option to do a work order, and we also have a physical inventory option for the tech to work through a physical inventory. Or if somebody has access to the app, they can sign in. Even when they're not a tech, they can do physical inventories for different locations. Moving on, and honestly moving away from some of the new service features, the next thing we want to look at is changes that we've made to routing and delivery. One of the changes from our delivery degree days setup is on the degree day table, you can actually determine how many days you project out for your projected degree days. On your projected degree days, this is a great and very helpful tool for doing delivery pulls because you can use this degree day number to pull out into the future for your automatic deliveries. In admin setup, we find our degree day tables. You can see the default is to schedule out 7 days worth of projections. However, you do have the option to expand that and do a longer pull into the future so your projections can go further out than 7 days. I've had customers use this up to about 2 weeks. I believe you could probably go further than that, but at that point the weather might not be quite as accurate. Just depending, weather can be hard to predict going that far out into the future, but you can add additional days. So if you do delivery pulls in a longer than 7-day fashion, you can always change your projected day pull and use that new number to do your delivery pulls. Another new feature is the automatic pulling of tank monitored tickets. So if we were to go in our setup again and open up our tank monitor setup, scroll down to the bottom, we have a list of tanks that are in the system. You could find the tanks that you would want Cargas to automatically create a ticket for, and you would select that tank for auto ticket creation, and you would put in the threshold and basically say at what point when the tank hits this level, I want a ticket created for this. So let's say in this particular customer's case, whenever the tank reads 25% or less, I want Cargas to go ahead and auto create a ticket for me. I would have my auto ticket creation selected and then put on my 25% threshold and press the save button. I'm working in a test site. We don't actually have a real tank monitor integration, so that's why we're getting error messages here left and right when we try to do this. But in a real life scenario, that would then be set on that tank. And instead of having to go under the delivery tank monitor section, Cargas would automatically create that ticket and it would be in the delivery center, unless of course the customer is on hold. If the customer is on hold, that ticket would live in the delivery on hold screen. Another thing to point out, when we're looking at tank setup, if I were to edit into this tank, the allow multiple deliveries option is still going to be in effect even if you have the automatic ticket creation set up. So if this is not selected and there is already an open and unposted delivery for this tank and the reading hits 25%, and that was our threshold, since there's already an open ticket, Cargas won't create a duplicate ticket for that tank. So you'll just want to make sure that if you're in a situation where a customer could potentially have multiple deliveries in a short period of time because they're very, very high consumers, and you may not have the previous delivery posted before the next one would need to be created, that you allow multiple deliveries for those customers if you're using that automatic ticket creation for your monitored tanks. Another new feature, I should have left this open. Another new feature is in the tank setup, if a customer would like an emailed copy of their delivery tickets sent to them every time a delivery has taken place, you can mark that tank to receive email copies of the delivery tickets. It's going to default to whatever the main email address is on the customer account. If they had multiple email addresses, though, you can select a different email from the dropdown. Once that's saved, any delivery then that takes place, once the delivery is complete, that customer will receive an email copy of the ticket. Along with that, if I were to jump into mobile delivery, and if I were to go to my completed tickets, I could open a completed ticket, and let's say this customer doesn't have it set up to always receive email tickets, and I just want to do a one-off because maybe the customer ran out to me and requested it. I can do an email delivery ticket right from the actions menu. Go ahead, add email, and press send. Move away from tanks, and we're going to dive into the delivery center and talk about some new features in the delivery center itself. If I open routes, I have a route created here for myself. If I were to open this route, one of the things that you can do when you have a route is you can actually add in different reloading stops. So if I put this in and I go to actions, and the one thing with this is the device does have to be associated with a truck. So let me actually open the route that I had open today and dispatched. So you can see here, we have the route set up, and from the actions menu, there is this add reloading stop after ticket. So if I were to select that, I'd be able to add in a reloading stop. So I dispatched this to show the email ticket feature. I'm going to recall this so that I can show what that would look like to add in a reloading stop. So we're going to let that do its thing. And while it's working, I'm going to go ahead and show you the view map feature. So under the routes, we're going to hit view map. And when we're looking at view map, it's going to default to the filters I have in place in the delivery center, but I can hit the filter routes button here, and you can put in a date range to view all open routes, or a specific fuel item, or a specific delivery driver. Whatever you put in here will basically be the options that we can show. So you can see I have my two routes that I created. If I were to select the highlight route function, you can see here I have their route path selected. And this is a great tool to make sure that we're not, having drivers crisscross each other or going into the same place. You can also select individual tickets and you can change their route. So if you do see there's a ticket on a particular driver that it doesn't really make sense for that driver to do that delivery, maybe it makes more sense to add that ticket to a completely separate route, then you can change the route and reassign that ticket to a driver where it makes a little more sense. One of the other cool features here, if I were to select the Add Unassigned Tickets button, I can use any of the filters that I have available here, including fuel item, delivery zone, a particular range within existing tickets that I'm viewing, similar to when you're building an individual route. The difference doing it this way is I can get all my tickets, plot them on a map, and then what I can do is I can select those tickets and route them to a particular driver. So instead of having to do individual routes and siphon off a little tickets onto that route, go into the next route, siphon off a little tickets, I can do all of that from this screen by using my lasso tool, grabbing some tickets, changing the route, and selecting the route I would like them to go on. But we can go ahead and plug those in. So you can see here in this case, what I did was I put them on the more northern route, which probably doesn't make the most sense. That's when I can go through, select these tickets, and I can always change that route again. So this is an excellent way to really build routes and improve efficiency so we know that drivers aren't necessarily crossing each other as they're going through and driving through their route. If I were to select map layers 2, at this point I can remove unassigned tickets and evaluate my routes again. And if I needed to access my route, I could always hit the menu, hit route details, and view that route. So now that I have my route recalled, I'm going to take a moment here and bring this up, and we'll get this example going to see what a reloading stop looks like. So one of the things to keep in mind while I'm getting this example prepped for us is the reloading stop requires a little bit of setup. So in order for the setup to work, you would need to either apply the reloading stop to the address information, excuse me, to the inventory locations where a service tech could potentially be pulling from. So in order to do that, you would go into the inventory location and add that address and get it geocoded. The other option would be if you have drivers that go to, let's say, a particular vendor or a particular rack to pull inventory, then they would have to pull that from a particular lifting terminal. So on the lifting terminal setup, we would select where they're pulling from, give that terminal a name. That terminal would then be applied to a particular address and a particular vendor. So we're going to let that go through for just a second here. I'm going to go ahead and show where that setup lives in the admin setup area. So if I were going to go to my inventory setup and I were to hit inventory locations, and I'm just going to look at this particular bulk plant as a for instance. Any bulk plant where a driver would pull from, you would have to select it as a reloading stop, put in the address, and press geocode address. That will geocode that address and put a GPS ping where that driver should go. Now it's similar to setting up a lifting terminal, and I'll show that next here. So if we were to go into our setup list, and if we were actually to go to the wholesale area, you would hit your lifting terminals, and from your lifting terminals, you would add addresses to your lifting terminals and mark that as a reloading stop. Geocode the address again, so we have a GPS ping for that. And then under the inventory lookup, vendor lookup, we apply those lifting terminals to vendor locations. So if I were to choose a particular vendor, you can add a lifting terminal here or edit into each individual location and choose a lifting terminal ID. So let me go ahead, I'm going to get my example up and running here. Throw these tickets in. Let's get these set up for you. I'm going to do these under a different route so we can see the layout's a little bit different. So we're going to do this here. I'll show it from the beginning because I think it's a little bit easier. If we were to have a new route, And we create this example route. Prefer the word example better than test. I can go ahead and add tickets to routes. I'm going to do this very similar to what we would do if we were doing these as a whole. I'm just going to grab all these tickets and throw them on this route. So if I were still building routes from this screen, is very similar to what you're used to doing now, as well as when you're looking at the whole map. So I can go ahead and press add to route. So one thing you'll notice is the routes now auto update, and there's not really a save button anymore. So you used to have to go ahead and save any of those routes. So when you select the particular driver, that driver should be associated with a truck. So one of the important things when we're looking at reloading stops is that if drivers are using the same tablets and the same trucks, that makes this a little easier. By doing that, you'd be able to see and calculate the quantity that's in that truck, and then Cargas can go ahead and recommend where the reloading stop should go. So let me just go ahead and get this situated here. I apologize, I picked a truck that doesn't have this product on it, so that's why it's not letting me, it's not recognizing that truck. We're going to circle back to that here in a moment. We're going to move on because there are other features. But if you weren't too excited like I was, you could actually select a particular, either a particular delivery ticket, and from the actions menu, you can add a reloading stop after the ticket. However, it's important that that truck actually carries the product, which was an oversight on my part. So I apologize for that. But let's go ahead and look at some of the other features, and we can always circle back to that. We'll make sure to get more information out about that. Let's go ahead, let's talk more about mobile delivery. So a couple of features that have been asked for. If I were to end this shift here, we had our truck inspection. We've always had a post-trip inspection. Now, if I end my shift, we're going to say nothing's wrong with that truck. One of the new features is a pre-trip inspection. So if I were to start my shift and I press the Start Shift button, I am now going to be prompted to do a pre-trip inspection. So to do a pre-trip inspection, there is an application setting that needs to be turned on. Just flip that switch in application settings, and that will now be an option for you. The system will still store this as they do with the post-trip inspection. Whatever your settings are to store this, usually set to 90 days. It will store that on the server before purging them. If I go ahead and complete this and submit, go ahead and start my shift. If I needed to view that, I could just go to the menu and I can view my shift, and you'll be able to see the last pre or post-trip inspection. One of the other things that a lot of drivers have actually asked for is the scratch pad that used to be in old mobile. So if you were familiar with our old mobile delivery, under the inventory section, there used to be a scratch pad where drivers could also track if there were small variances in the calculated quantity. Now in Cargas, transactions that the drivers do for inventory, not for delivery, but for inventory transactions, those inventory transactions will be tracked and posted immediately. So the system quantities update as we go. However, if something gets missed or forgotten or is slightly off, drivers do have the option to create a scratch pad here and record their actual onboard quantities. Now, these don't affect the inventory calculation. If there is something majorly off, we would need to make sure that all transactions have been posted, or if there are other adjustments that need to be made, that those adjustments actually get made so that our system quantities are updated correctly. Another feature that's more of a back office setup piece, but does affect the drivers, is going to be our new feature to include additional customers in the offline delivery setup. So if I were to go into the offline delivery settings, we have our standard offline accounts where you can basically pick an account like we've been doing if you have the new mobile in older versions. You'd pick an offline account. This is only used when a driver is outside of cell phone range and trying to create a brand new delivery for a customer that has not already been dispatched out to them. You can actually go into download accounts, and what you can do is per device, you can add in and download specific accounts. So if I were to do this, you can be very specific and say, I know John Smith down the road he's out of cell phone range, and every time I'm nearby, he always runs out to me and asks for a delivery. I can download that individual specific ticket, or you can download groups of customers rather, based on any of this account criteria. So maybe you have a whole delivery zone that's typically outside of range and you just want to make sure that they're downloaded to a device just in case. You can do that. You can do zip codes. You can do specific attributes. Anything you have, any combination of this information will show you a list of customers and allow you to download them to a specific tablet. Now that download is only available to the tablet you download it to. It will not be available to other tablets, just to reduce the amount of information that's stored on the different tablets. A couple more features, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions. Some of these are just various back office features. Don't really fall into the rest of the categories that I had created for this presentation. The first is, you may have already noticed if you're on our version, is our contextual help. So instead of having the old school knowledge-based search button here, we have the contextual help button. This does require an email address set up that has access to the support site. That email address is then used to log into the support site. That email address is added to the employee master, and it pulls articles from the knowledge base. Now, the articles that it suggests are going to be based on whatever screen in Cargas you're looking at. So as you navigate throughout Cargas, different screens will have different suggestions, but you can always do a search. So if I did a search for degree days, I can have my degree day topics come up. So you can still search the entire knowledge base, but your suggestions are going to be based on what screen you're on. The next feature is now you can add recurring charges to equipment, not just tanks, but if there are other service equipment that a customer can rent. Actually, let me go in this account. If I were to go to equipment, and if I were to edit this equipment, not that anybody would technically be renting a furnace, but you could do that. Under the actions menu, you can add a recurring charge, and you can put in a recurring charge just like you would if you're setting up a tank rental. Another feature that's come out is our Cargas dashboards. The Cargas dashboards are under the reports and dashboards. Basically, dashboards are an excellent addition to our reporting functionality. It takes a second to load here, so bear with us. So in the Cargas dashboards, we have some standard dashboards that come with the system. So if I do, let's see, I think I can run this one. So I run one of these dashboards. It brings you your information here so you can do charts and graphs. Let's see if I can find a more fun one in our system here. Let's see. There are standard ones that come with the package, so to speak. You can also work with a consultant to create more specific ones for you and create customized reports. The nice thing with the dashboards is they can be scheduled, they can be emailed, and you can also schedule the email. So if you want a particular dashboard to assess every Monday and get sent out to an email distribution list, you can do that. You can schedule that. Your report will run on the day you choose and then get sent to the distribution list that you create. I have one last miscellaneous feature that I'd like to highlight, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions, and we'll wrap up for today. So one of the other new features is our tax detail improvement. So anybody who's lived in an area where taxes change frequently will know that previously to our most updated version, what would happen is if a tax rate changed, you'd have to create a new tax detail and then reassign it to every single tax schedule that's related. Things are a little different now in our latest release. You could edit a particular tax detail, and instead of going through every single tax schedule that this particular tax detail is involved in, under the Actions menu, you could put in new rate, and you can put in what that rate is and what date it's changing. So this way, if you know come October 1st, this rate is changing to a particular level, you can put in, we'll say, it's going up a little bit. You can say this is effective as of 10/1. Just press save. All your tax schedules will be updated, and you're not going to have to scramble on the day of the change to make sure all your tax schedules have been updated. This will just follow through and be done for you, similar to how we would do a pricing change. It's the same idea. You can just do a tax detail change. So that is, like I said, a very brief overview of the new features that have come out in the last couple of years. To talk about if you want to go ahead and upgrade, if you're not on one of these latest releases, typically what ends up happening is our customer success managers really work with their contacts at your companies to make sure that you're getting updated when it's most feasible for everybody involved. Usually it's a great discussion to have with that person, whoever your customer success manager is. I recommend putting in a support ticket if there's a particular feature you saw today that you either want to learn more about or find out if you can go ahead and subscribe to that. And certain modules that we looked at today, such as dashboards or maybe even new service. If you weren't using service before and you want to sign up for that module, you can go ahead and do that. You would just have to reach out to your customer success manager. Best way to do that is go ahead and put in a ticket. Our support team will copy that over to your customer success manager, and they'll go through the details and kind of talk about timing and answer any questions that you might have. Typically what happens then is your test site would get updated with the latest release. Go through, do some testing, practicing, training. Everything looks good, we'll get that copied into live. Some of these items might be bigger projects, so if you've never used mobile service before, or you would like more extensive training moving in from old service to new service, your customer success manager can also talk about getting consulting help to help train and set up and move into that new platform, just as a for instance. So I'm going to stop it there. We'll go ahead and look at any questions that may have come through. So looking at some of the questions that have come through, um, the first question here is emailed copies of tickets. Does that include the meter block data? Yes, so the emailed ticket includes an image of the ticket, including meter block data. The only thing it would not include is if on your paper ticket on the back or on one of the carbon copies, if you have pre-printed information on that, that's not something that comes through Cargas, it's just on your paper stock, your pre-printed, paper stock information would not be included. I'm gonna wait and see if there are any other questions that come through. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions. I thank you all so much for your time. That will wrap up today's presentation. We are looking to have our next office hours with Billy in August on the 26th. I'm going to have some guest hosts with me to talk about our summer checklist, what to work on the last waning days of summer as we get ready for winter and the busy season. We're going to look at, just general system cleanup. We're also going to include information and tips and tricks on onboarding seasonal employees. So we'll have some great information to share on that. So looking forward to that one. I thank you all for your time. And I'll hold on the line just in case there are other questions. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week and the weekend, and I'll see you soon.